Desperate, she sold herself for $1 million to a billionaire who had never touched a woman, but she never imagined he would fall in love with her at first sight. The reflection in the Sterling Technologies elevator mirror didn't lie. Rose Mitchell nervously adjusted the navy blazer she had bought at a sale 2 years ago as floor numbers flashed on her way up to the penthouse. Her fingers tightened around the folder containing her resume, a document she knew was completely irrelevant to the true purpose of her visit. "Floor 78, CEO's office," the elevator's digital voice announced. The doors opened to a minimalist environment in shades of gray and white, where a stern-looking receptionist was waiting for her. "Miss Mitchell, Mr. Sterling, we'll see you now." Rose took a deep breath, remembering why she had come here. The image of her brother Joey, just 12 years old, hooked up to tubes and machines at Boston Children's Hospital, was all the courage she needed. The experimental treatment for his rare heart condition cost $1 million, money his family would never be able to raise. The office door opened, revealing a panoramic view of Manhattan through the floor-to-ceiling windows. Alex Sterling had his back turned, looking out at the city he had helped transform with his technological innovations. At 32, he was a living legend of Silicon Valley, known as much for his brilliance as his reclusiveness. "Miss Mitchell," he turned his voice surprisingly soft for someone of her reputation. "Explain to me why you are here." Rose felt her heart quicken as she met Sterling's blue-gray eyes. They were eyes that carried a loneliness that she hadn't expected to see in someone so powerful. "Mr. Sterling, I came to make a business proposal." "You're a medical student, not a businesswoman," he replied, consulting a tablet on his desk. "Second year of pediatric residency at Massachusetts General Hospital. Exemplary grades, but nothing that would justify a meeting with me. I offer a year of my life in exchange for $1 million. Rose snapped her words, echoing through the silent office. Alex Sterling stopped, his fingers frozen on the tablet. For the first time in years, something caught him completely off guard. "Elaborate." "I know about your situation. The media calls you the untouchable. You need someone to accompany you to social events, someone who understands boundaries and keeps up appearances. I offer my services as your official escort for a period of 1 year. The silence that followed was deafening. Sterling walked to the window again, his hands clasped behind his back. "Why?" "My little brother needs an experimental treatment. He's dying, Mr. Sterling. I've tried every conventional means of getting the money." Alex turned to face her, studying every detail of her face. Rose held his gaze, allowing him to see her determination and desperation. To her surprise, something in her chest tightened as a lone tear ran down her face. "Do you understand what you are proposing? You will have to abandon your life in Boston, move to New York. Your presence will be required at dinners, charity events, business meetings. You will be photographed, speculated on, judged." "I understand perfectly." Alex took a contract from a drawer. He already had everything prepared, as if he had been waiting for something like this. "Here are the terms. Read carefully. There will be no physical intimacy of any kind. You will maintain appropriate distance in public. You will sign a confidentiality agreement." Rose took the contract with shaking hands. Every word was a reminder of what I was about to do, the line I was about to cross. "Why should I trust you?" Alex asked suddenly. "How can I be sure you're not another opportunist?" "Because unlike everyone else who has approached you, Mr. Sterling, I am being honest about my motivations from the beginning. I am not selling a lie or feigning interest. I am offering a clean business deal." Something about her directness struck him. Alex Sterling, who had built empires based on algorithms and predictability, found himself faced with a variable he couldn't calculate. The way his heart raced when she entered the room, the way his hands were sweating now, sensations he hadn't experienced since. "Sign," he said, thrusting a pen toward her. "The money will be transferred once the contract is finalized." Rose signed her name with a mixture of relief and apprehension. When his fingers accidentally brushed Alex's as he returned the pen, they both felt an electric current course through their bodies. "Welcome to Sterling Technologies, Miss Mitchell," Alex said, his voice betraying an emotion he couldn't name. "His first public appearance will be tomorrow night at the Sterling Foundation for Medical Innovations Charity Ball." Rose nodded, putting the contract away in her briefcase. When she reached the door, Alex called her one last time. "Rose." She turned around, surprised by the use of her first name. "Your brother, what's his name?" "Joey," she replied, a soft smile lighting up her face for the first time since entering the office. "I will personally ensure he receives the best treatment possible." At that moment, something changed in the air between them. A cold trade agreement began to develop imperceptible cracks, tiny fissures through which long-suppressed emotions would begin to leak. Rose stared at the evening dress hanging on the door of her temporary room in the penthouse of the Plaza Hotel. The deep red fabric shimmered in the evening light streaming in through the French windows. An attached note stated dryly, "Chosen by the Sterling Technologies style team. Wear it tonight." His hands shook as he slid down the zipper. The dress fit perfectly, as if it had been custom-made, and it probably had been. In less than 24 hours, his life had completely transformed. A call from Sophie Chen, Alex Sterling's personal assistant, had organized his express move from Boston to New York, including settling into the luxury hotel until a suitable apartment was prepared. The phone buzzed with a message from Joey. "How's NY, sis? The doctors said they're going to start preliminary exams tomorrow." Rose smiled through the tears that threatened to ruin her makeup. It was worth it. Every second of this charade was worth it for his brother. "Miss Mitchell," Sophie's voice sounded through the door. "Mr. Sterling will be here in 15 minutes. Are you ready?" Rose took one last look in the mirror. The woman staring back at her seemed like a stranger, sophisticated, elegant, worthy of standing next to one of the most powerful men in the country. "I'm ready." The private elevator opened to reveal Alex Sterling in an impeccable tuxedo. For a moment, they both stood frozen, studying each other. Rose noticed how his hands twitched slightly when he saw her, an almost imperceptible gesture of nervousness that humanized the untouchable billionaire. "Are you—" Alex started but stopped composing himself. "The dress fits perfectly. Shall we?" On the way to the Metropolitan Museum of Art, where the ball would be held, Alex instructed her about the main participants of the event. The Sterling Foundation for Medical Innovation funds experimental research across the country. Many of the doctors present today are beneficiaries of these funds. Rose absorbed every word, aware of the irony of her situation. As a medical student, she should have been ecstatic about the networking opportunity, but all she could think about was how her palms sweated every time she felt Alex's gaze on her. The car stopped at the entrance to the museum, where a crowd of photographers was waiting. "Remember," Alex said softly, "stay close but not too close. Smile naturally. And if anyone asks—" "We're old college friends who recently reconnected," Rose added. "Don't worry, I memorized the script." But nothing could have prepared her for the moment Alex placed his hand on her back to guide her through the flashes. The touch, even through the fabric of her dress, sent shivers down her spine. She noticed that he had also tensed, his breathing slightly altered. Inside the museum, the Great Hall was transformed into a fairy tale ballroom. Hundreds of people circulated between glasses of champagne and conversations about millions in investments. Alex, an elegant woman in her 50s, approached. "You finally decided to honor us with your presence at a social event." Dr. Caroline Walsh," Alex introduced. "This is Rose Mitchell." The doctor's shrewd eyes studied Rose with interest. "Mitchell from the pediatrics team at Mass General." "Yes, ma'am," Rose replied, genuinely surprised to be recognized. "I read your article on innovative techniques for communicating with terminally ill pediatric patients. Impressive for a resident." The conversation naturally turned to medical matters. and Rose found herself momentarily forgetting her role as a hired escort. Alex watched in fascination as she passionately discussed new treatment protocols, her eyes shining with genuine interest. The night wore on, and Rose noticed that Alex rarely left her. Their interactions, although formal, carried an underlying tension that neither could explain. At a particularly busy moment, he leaned over to whisper in her ear, "You're doing extraordinarily well." The hot breath on her skin made Rose shiver. Years of practice feigning interest in boring conversations with patients' families, she joked, trying to ease the tension. A ghost of a smile crossed Alex's lips, the first she had seen since she met him. It was like watching the sun rising through heavy clouds. When the band began to play a waltz, the crowd's expectant gazes turned toward them. Alex reached out his hand hesitantly. "It would be inappropriate for us not to dance at least once." Rose accepted his hand, feeling the almost imperceptible tremor in her fingers. As they twirled around the room maintaining the protocol's distance, each touch seemed charged with electricity. Alex led with the same precision he applied to his business, but there was something different in his eyes, a vulnerability that contrasted with his rigid posture. "Your brother started exams today," he commented softly. Rose almost stumbled, surprised that he remembered. "How do you know?" "I have direct access to the medical team. I want to make sure every penny is well invested in your recovery." The song ended, but they remained a moment longer than necessary with their hands clasped together. When they separated, they both looked slightly dazed. The rest of the evening passed in a blur of polite introductions and conversation. In the car returning to the plaza, the silence between them was full of unspoken words. "Thank you," Rose said finally, "for worrying about Joey." Alex kept his eyes fixed on the window. "Don't say thank you. It's just business." But when she got out of the car, their eyes met briefly, and they both knew something had changed. The business agreement that seemed so simple on paper was beginning to become complicated with emotions that neither of them had anticipated or were prepared to face. A week after the charity ball, Rose was settling into her new Upper East Side apartment, an elegant space that made her old Boston studio look like a broom closet. The soft beige walls held carefully selected modern furniture, but the room still lacked personality, just like its new life. As he organized his few personal belongings, his phone buzzed with a message from Sophie. "Mr. Sterling requests your presence at Sterling Technologies at 2 p.m. Car waiting in 30 minutes. Rose sighed quickly, changing out of her sweats and into an office-appropriate navy blue dress. Over the past week, her encounters with Alex had been limited to 2 corporate events where they maintained the perfectly orchestrated facade of casual friendship. However, she couldn't forget the way her hands had shaken during that dance. The office was different today, quieter, almost empty. Sophie led her directly to Alex's office, where he was engrossed in several computer screens. "Rose," he said without looking up, "I need you to accompany me to San Francisco tomorrow. Sterling Technologies board meeting." She felt her stomach turn into knots. "San Francisco? For how long?" 3 days. Alex finally looked up, and something in his expression changed when he saw her. "Is there a problem?" "Joey has an important appointment on Friday. I promised I'd be there." A heavy silence filled the room. Alex stood up, walking to the window, his usual refuge when he needed to process emotions. "I can arrange a video conference with the medical team." "It's not the same," Rose replied, her voice shaking slightly. "He's only 12, Alex. He's scared." The use of his first name, something she rarely did, seemed to hit him like an electric current. He turned, his eyes meeting hers with a disturbing intensity. "You can go visit him today," he suggested, his voice softer. "My private jet is available." Rose blinked, surprised by the offer. Would you do that?" "It's just logistics," Alex replied quickly, returning to his professional mask. "We can take off in an hour." The flight to Boston was enveloped in a tense silence. Alex worked on his laptop while Rose alternated between discreetly watching him and gazing at the clouds outside the window. Occasionally, their gazes would meet, sending inexplicable shivers down their spines. At Boston Children's Hospital, Joey was sitting in his bed surrounded by medical equipment, but his face lit up when he saw Rose. To her surprise, Alex followed her to the bedroom. "Wow, you're Alex Sterling," Joey exclaimed, his eyes wide. "I use your virtual reality app to study when I'm stuck here." Alex, normally so controlled, seemed momentarily disconcerted by the boy's excitement. "Do you like technology?" "I love it. I'm learning programming in online classes. Rose said you started programming when you were 13. A genuine smile, the second Rose had ever seen, appeared on Alex's face. 12, actually. I had just... He stopped abruptly, his expression closing like a slamming door. Rose noticed the change instantly. Something about the mention of that particular age affected him deeply. She watched as he composed himself, going back to talking to Joey about codes and innovations, but a shadow remained in his eyes. After an hour, when Joey started to show signs of tiredness, they said goodbye. In the hallway, Rose lightly touched Alex's arm, the first deliberate contact since dancing at the prom. "Thank you for this," she said softly. It meant a lot to him. Alex glanced at where her hand rested on his arm, but didn't move away. "Your brother is different than I imagined. Like this. He doesn't let the disease define who he is." Alex seemed to be talking more to himself than to her. "At 12 years old, Again, he interrupted himself, but this time Rose didn't let it go. "What happened when you were 12, Alex?" Their eyes met, and for a moment, Rose saw all her defenses waver. But then, like a curtain being pulled back, he composed himself. "We need to get back to New York. We have a flight to catch tomorrow." On the way back, as the sun set, turning the sky pink and orange, Rose realized that she was beginning to see beyond the untouchable facade. There was a 12-year-old boy buried somewhere inside Alex, Sterling carrying a pain he never allowed anyone to witness. Meanwhile, Alex struggled with sensations he hadn't experienced in decades. The way Rose interacted with Joey, her natural kindness, the way her touch, however casual, sent waves of heat through his body, all of it scared and fascinated him in equal measure. The business agreement that seemed so simple was turning into something much more complex, and neither of them knew how to deal with the emotions that were beginning to spill through the cracks in their carefully constructed armor. The Sterling Technology's private plane landed at San Francisco International Airport under typically cloudy Bay Area skies. Rose watched as Alex compulsively checked her phone, a habit she was beginning to recognize as a sign of anxiety. "The board meeting starts in 3 hours," Sophie informed her, checking her tablet as they descended the plane's stairs. "The hotel is already prepared." On the Fairmont San Francisco, a historic icon atop Nob Hill would be their home for the next 3 days. Rose barely had time to admire the spectacular view of the bay through the windows of her suite before Sophie appeared in an elegant black dress for the meeting. In the elevator going down to the lobby, Alex seemed more tense than usual. "My father will be present today," he said abruptly, breaking the silence. "Richard Sterling rarely shows up at board meetings, but he apparently made a point of this one." Rose noticed the slight tremor in his voice at the mention of his father, another piece of the puzzle that was Alex Sterling slowly falling into place. "Aren't you guys close?" "We haven't spoken in 15 years, he replied dryly, adjusting his tie with fidgety fingers. The car took them to the impressive Sterling Technologies building in Mission Bay. In the top-floor boardroom, executives in expensive suits chatted in small groups. Alex's arrival caused a momentary silence, followed by formal greetings and curious glances towards Rose. That's when Richard Sterling entered the room. The 60-something man had the same blue-gray eyes as Alex, but carried a calculated coldness that made Rose instinctively shiver. His gaze passed over Alex, as if he were invisible, settling on Rose with clinical interest. "So this is your newest acquisition," Richard commented, his voice oozing venom beneath a layer of false cordiality. Alex stepped forward subtly, positioning himself between Rose and her father. "Rose Mitchell, an old friend from college. Rose, this is Richard Sterling." "Fascinating." Richard smiled humorlessly. "Considering you dropped out of Harvard your freshman year." The tension in the room was palpable. Rose felt Alex stiffen beside her, and without thinking lightly touched her back, a gesture of support that didn't go unnoticed by Richard. The meeting passed like a silent battle. Alex delivered impressive growth and innovation numbers, but each achievement was met by Richard with a cutting comment about beginner's luck or impulsive decisions. During the break, Rose found Alex alone on the porch, his hands gripping the railing so hard his knuckles were white. "At 12, he began suddenly, his voice almost a whisper. "My mother died in a car accident. Richard was driving. He survived without a scratch." Rose felt her heart sink. The pieces were starting to fall into place, the trauma, the isolation, the inability to accept physical contact. "He blamed me." Alex continued, staring out into the bay. "She was picking me up from programming class. If I had waited at home like he wanted." Without thinking, Rose placed her hand over his on the railing. To his surprise, Alex didn't move away. Instead, his fingers intertwined with hers as if searching for an anchor. "It wasn't your fault," she said softly. "You were just a kid." After that, Richard changed. His touch became painful. So I learned to avoid any physical contact. It was safer that way. Rose's heart ached with every word. The image of a 12-year-old boy closing himself off from the world after losing his mother and facing his father's cruelty was devastating. "Alex, I don't need your pity," he interrupted sharply, letting go of her hand. "This doesn't change anything about our agreement." But something had changed. When they returned to the meeting room, Rose noticed how Alex unconsciously sought her proximity, as if her presence offered some kind of protection against Richard's barbs. At the end of the day, Richard made one last venomous comment. "I hope she's worth the investment, son, although I doubt any amount of money can buy what you really need." Alex froze, and Rose saw the 12-year-old in her eyes again. Without hesitation, she held his hand tightly. "Come on, Alex. Our dinner with the medtech investors awaits us." In the car, he remained silent, but didn't let go of her hand. The vulnerability of that gesture said more than 1,000 words. "Joey texted me," Rose commented softly, trying to bring him back to the present. "He's writing a basic program inspired by your tips." A small smile appeared at the corner of Alex's lips. "He has potential, just like you did, and still do." Their eyes met in the reflection of the car window, and for the first time, Rose saw something other than the pain in Alex's eyes, a spark of hope, perhaps, or something deeper that neither of them was ready to name. That night, in their separate rooms at the Fairmont, they both lay awake thinking about the crumbling barriers and the dangerous terrain they were entering. The business agreement that seemed so simple was now stained with unshed tears and touches that meant so much more than they should have. Back in New York, the routine that Rose and Alex had established subtly changed after the events in San Francisco. The looks lasted a second longer, the silences carried deeper meanings, and the physical distance that once seemed natural now weighed like an invisible current. During a particularly busy morning at Sterling Technologies, Sophie hurried into Alex's office. "Sir, there's been a leak. Page 6 is about to publish a story about your relationship with Miss Mitchell." Alex, who was reviewing contracts, froze. "What did you find?" "Apparently someone at the hospital in Boston told you about Joey's condition. They're insinuating that you're paying for his treatment in exchange for favors." Rose, who had just entered the room for her daily agenda meeting, felt her blood run cold in her veins. "Joey can't see that. He's just a kid." "Cancel my appointments," Alex ordered Sophie, standing up abruptly. and prepare the official statement denying any relationship beyond friendship. When they were alone, Alex began pacing around the office like a caged animal. That's exactly why I keep people away. The media turns everything into a circus. Alex, Rose approached him, noticing how tense his shoulders were. It's not your fault. No. He turned his eyes, sparkling. If I hadn't allowed you to get so close, if I had kept things strictly professional. Like in San Francisco, Rose challenged. When did you finally let your defenses down and tell me about your father? Alex recoiled as if he had been slapped. That was a mistake. No, that was honesty. For the first time since we met, you were real with me. A moment of electric tension was established between them. Rose could see the internal battle in Alex's eyes, the desire to get closer, fighting years of conditioning to keep his distance. I have a solution, he finally said, his voice controlled. I'll double the value of our settlement. $2 million, and you can return to Boston today. Joey will continue to receive treatment, and his reputation will be intact. Rose felt like she had been punched in the stomach. Do you really think it's about money? Isn't that why you came to me in the first place? Yes, but things have changed. You have changed. I have changed. Alex approached the window, his usual refuge position. Nothing's changed, Rose. You're still here because you need the money, and I'm still... He hesitated. Damaged. Rose walked across the room to him, stopping just inches away. You're not damaged, Alex. You're hurt. There's a difference. Without warning, she reached out and touched his face. Alex shivered but didn't pull away. It was the first time someone had touched him like that in 2 decades. What are you doing? He whispered, his voice shaking. Proving a point. Rose kept her hand on his face, feeling the tension gradually ease under her touch. Your body still remembers what it's like to be touched gently. For a moment, Alex closed his eyes, allowing himself to feel. When he opened them again, there was a raw vulnerability in his gaze that made Rose's heart race. Why do you care so much? He asked softly. Because I saw beyond the untouchable CEO. I saw the boy who lost his mother, the man who built an empire to prove his worth, and the person who, even though he pretended not to care personally, ensured that my brother received the best treatment possible. Sophie's phone interrupted the moment. The article had been published. Alex walked away abruptly, recomposing his professional mask. We need to make a joint statement, he said, returning to businessman mode. Appear in public, show that we are just friends. Rose let her hand fall, feeling the emptiness where moments before there had been connection. And that's what we are, Alex, just friends. He didn't respond, but the look in his eyes said it all. There was much more between them than friendship, much more than a business agreement, and that terrified him more than any newspaper headline. The car will be waiting at 7 p.m., he finally said. Dinner at per se. The press will be there. When Rose left the office, Alex remained still, his hand unconsciously touching the spot where her fingers had been moments before. The warmth of her touch lingered like an echo of something he had long forgotten he needed. In her apartment, Rose stared at her reflection in the mirror as she prepared for dinner. The woman staring back at her was no longer the same one who had walked into Alex Sterling's office with a business proposal. She had transformed into someone who saw beyond the walls he had built, someone who dangerously was starting to care a lot more than she should. Dinner at Per Se had turned into a media nightmare, even before Rose and Alex arrived at the renowned restaurant in Columbus Circle. Social media was already abuzz with speculation about their relationship. The video of them leaving Sterling Technologies earlier with Rose touching Alex's face had gone viral. Ignore the flashes, Alex muttered as he helped Rose out of the car, his hand on her back shaking slightly. Keep your smile and follow the script. The maitre d' led them to a strategically placed table, visible enough for the paparazzi outside to take photos, but far enough away to maintain an illusion of privacy. Rose realized that Alex had planned every detail. This was how he handled situations beyond his control, turning them into meticulously orchestrated performances. "Don't you ever get tired?" she asked, after they placed their orders, noting how he compulsively checked the notifications on his phone. "From what?" "To live your life as if it were a series of codes to be executed. Input, output, damage control." Alex looked up, meeting hers with an intensity that made her stomach turn into knots. "It worked for 20 years. See you this morning. At the office?" The waiter arrived with the wine, momentarily interrupting the growing tension. Alex tasted it mechanically, nodding in approval, but Rose noticed how his fingers gripped the glass with unnecessary force. "What happened this morning was a lapse in judgment," he said finally, his voice low and controlled. "It can't happen again." "Why?" "Because it showed that you're still human, that you can still feel." A group of executives passed by his table, greeting Alex effusively. He responded with his rehearsed CEO smile, but Rose noticed the stiffness in his shoulders, the slight tremor in his hand, as he waved back. "I got a message from Richard," Alex continued when they were alone again. "He saw the video." Rose felt her heart sink. "What did he say?" "That I was becoming weak. That allowing anyone to get so close was a mistake that could cost shareholders billions." Alex let out a humorless laugh. 20 years of building sterling technologies, and he still sees me as that 12-year-old kid who couldn't do anything right. Without thinking, Rose reached across the table, her fingers brushing his. To his surprise, Alex didn't back down. Instead, his fingers briefly intertwined with hers as if seeking anchorage. "Joey called me today," she said softly. "He's writing a program to help other kids at the hospital connect virtually. He said he was inspired by you." Something changed in Alex's expression, an almost imperceptible softening around his eyes. "He's a special boy." "Yes, he is. And do you know what else he told me? That you are different from what people think. That you can see beyond your condition, beyond the limitations that others impose." "Rose," Alex began, but was interrupted by the sound of breaking glass. A photographer had managed to enter the restaurant, causing a commotion by knocking over a tray of glasses. In the momentary chaos that followed, Alex instinctively stood up and pulled Rose close, his body serving as a shield between her and the chaos. It was a brief but intense moment. Rose could feel his heart beating fast, his breath hot on her hair. It was the first time he had voluntarily initiated physical contact. "We need to get out of here," he murmured, still not letting go of her. In the car, the silence was deafening. Alex kept his eyes fixed on the window, but his hand occasionally touched the spot where Rose had been pressed against his chest moments before. "I'm sorry," he said finally. "I shouldn't have reacted that way. It will generate more speculation." "Stop apologizing for being human, Alex, for caring. Caring is dangerous. More dangerous than living the rest of your life in a dome letting Richard win." Alex turned sharply to face her, his eyes shining with a raw emotion she had never seen before. "You don't understand. Every person who has come close to me in the last 20 years has wanted something: money, power, influence. Until you—" "Yes, I came to you for money," Rose interrupted, her voice shaking. "But now I'm here because I care about you. And that terrifies me as much as it terrifies you." The car stopped in front of Rose's apartment. Before she could leave, Alex grabbed her wrist gently. "What do you want from me, Rose?" he asked, his voice barely above a whisper. "The truth. Not the CEO, not the untouchable billionaire. Just you, Alex." Their gazes met in the confined space of the car, filled with unspoken words and unmade promises. For a moment it looked like Alex was going to lean toward him, but then his phone vibrated. Another message from Richard. "Good evening, Rose," he said, releasing her wrist. As she watched the car drive away, Rose realized she was shaking. The trade agreement that had started this journey now seemed like a flimsy pretext for something much deeper and scarier that was growing between them. In her apartment alone, she received a text from Sophie. "Emergency board meeting tomorrow. Your presence is requested." The battle was just beginning. The Sterling Technologies boardroom was buzzing with tension the next morning. The hastily summoned council members took their usual places around the polished mahogany table. Rose noticed how some avoided looking directly at her while others barely concealed their curiosity. Alex entered last, his impeccable posture masking the bad night's sleep that the dark circles under his eyes betrayed. Richard Sterling was already sitting at the head of the table, a cold smile playing on his lips. "Ladies and gentlemen," Richard began before Alex could take his seat. "We are here to discuss the current situation that threatens the stability of Sterling Technologies." "What situation would that be, Dad?" Alex asked, his voice controlled, but carrying a tone of challenge that made Rose shiver. Richard projected the sensational headlines about Alex and Rose onto the main screen, including video of the office, incident and photos from the previous night's dinner. "Our shareholders are concerned. The untouchable image was a fundamental part of the company's value. Now we have that." The next photo showed the moment Alex had protected Rose in the restaurant, their bodies close in a way that seemed too intimate to be just professional. "With all due respect, Mr. Sterling," interjected Patricia Morrison, one of the senior directors, "I don't see how Alex's personal life affects the skill with which he runs this company." "No?" Richard raised an eyebrow. "Perhaps we should ask Miss Mitchell how much it cost to buy her influence over my son." Rose felt her blood run cold in her veins. Before he could respond, Alex slammed the table hard enough to make the coffee cups shake. "He arrives!" His voice thundered through the room. "Rose Mitchell is a respected professional and brilliant medical student who has helped Sterling Technologies expand its medical technology division. Any insinuation beyond that is defamation." "Interesting how you defend her." Richard smiled humorlessly. "Remember when you defended your mother like that before?" "Don't you dare!" Alex interrupted, his voice shaking with suppressed anger. "Do not use her memory for your manipulations." Rose watched the dynamic between father and son with growing horror. It was like watching an accident in slow motion, decades of trauma and resentment exploding in full view of the council. "Gentlemen," she stood up, surprising everyone, including herself. "Will you allow me to speak?" The silence that followed was his cue. "I met Alex Sterling a few months ago when I came to propose a partnership for the development of pediatric technologies. My younger brother is sick, yes, and Alex, demonstrating the same vision that transformed this company into a market leader, saw an opportunity to expand Sterling Technologies' reach in the medical sector." She paused, her eyes meeting Alex's briefly. "If this has sparked speculation about our personal relationship, perhaps we should ask ourselves why society finds it impossible for a man and a woman to work together without ulterior motives." Patricia Morrison began to applaud, discreetly followed by other council members. Richard Sterling remained impassive, but something in his eyes had changed, perhaps a flicker of grudging respect. "Sterling Technologies has grown 40% since I took over as president," Alex added, regaining control. "Our shares have never been more valued. If the board wants to remove me because of sensational headlines, that's within their rights. But I won't allow Rose's reputation to be tarnished by power plays." The meeting continued for another 2 hours, discussing communication strategies and damage control plans. When it finally ended, Rose was emotionally exhausted. In the private elevator, descending from the 78th floor, Alex finally broke the silence. "You didn't have to do that." "Done what?" "Defend myself. Stand up to Richard." Rose turned to face him. "Maybe it's time someone did." The elevator stopped between 2 floors, the lights flickering before settling into emergency lighting. Alex immediately checked his phone. "Electrical breakdown in the building," he reported. "Generators should come in a few minutes." Rose noticed how his hands were shaking slightly, how his breathing was faster. Confined spaces should be another trigger. "Alex?" she called softly. "Look at me." When their eyes met, she saw the growing panic in his eyes. Slowly telegraphing each movement, Rose approached. "Can I?" she asked, holding out her hand. Alex nodded, almost imperceptibly. Gently, she held his hand, intertwining her fingers with his. "Breathe with me," she instructed. "Inside. Outside. Inside. Outside." Gradually, his breathing normalized. His fingers tightened around hers, as if Rose were his only anchor to reality. "How did you know?" he asked after a few minutes. "That you have claustrophobia?" It was an educated guess. Childhood traumas tend to come in packages. A small smile appeared at the corner of his lips. "You would make an excellent psychiatrist." "I prefer pediatrics. Children are more honest about their fears." The elevator shook slightly, coming back to life. But Alex didn't let go of his hand right away. "Rose," he began, his voice low and intense. "About our agreement." The doors opened in the lobby, revealing a crowd of waiting employees. The intimate moment vanished like smoke in the wind. But something had fundamentally changed between them. In the confined space of that elevator, yet another layer of protection had dissolved, leaving them both vulnerable in a way that no contract could predict or control. News of the boardroom confrontation spread through Sterling Technologies like wildfire. The next morning, Rose found her name all over the major technology and gossip sites, with speculation about her role in the company ranging from revolutionary medical genius to ambitious scammer. "Don't read the comments," Sophie advised, handing him a coffee as they walked through the lobby. "Believe me, I've been there before when I started working with Alex. People love to create conspiracy theories." Rose nodded absently, her mind still, reliving the moments in the elevator. Alex's vulnerability, the warmth of his hand in hers, the unspoken words interrupted by the doors opening. "Miss Mitchell." A security guard approached. "Mr. Sterling requests your presence at the development lab." The laboratory occupied the entire 65th floor, a futuristic space filled with prototypes and workstations. Alex was hunched over a holographic table, manipulating three-dimensional images of something that looked like a medical device. "It's a pediatric heart monitor," he explained without turning around, sensing her presence. "Based on Joey's case, I thought we could develop something less invasive, more comfortable for children." Rose approached, watching in fascination as Alex manipulated the hologram. "Did you spend all night working on this?" "I couldn't sleep." He finally looked at her, and Rose noticed the more pronounced dark circles under his eyes. "After yesterday." "Alex, about what happened in the elevator." "It was a moment of weakness," he interrupted sharply. "I shouldn't have allowed you to see me like that." "Weakness?" Rose took a step towards him. "Is this what you think trusting someone is weakness?" Alex looked away, his fingers drumming nervously on the table. "Richard is right about one thing. I built my empire by keeping people away. It's safer that way." "Safer for whom? For the company or for your heart?" The question hovered between them like electricity in the air. Alex turned off the hologram, plunging the lab into a soft gloom. "I received an interesting proposal this morning." He changed the subject. "A medical conference in Seattle. They want me to present the new technologies we're developing for pediatrics. I thought you could join me, give your medical perspective." Seattle. Rose blinked, surprised by the abrupt change of subject. "How long?" 3 days. Next week." Alex hesitated. "Joey has an appointment on Thursday. I already checked. We can fly back in time." The fact that he checked Joey's schedule first didn't go unnoticed by Rose. "Why are you doing this?" "Alex." "Doing what?" "Caring. Developing technology. Specifically for kids. Memorizing Joey's appointments. All of this goes beyond our agreement." Alex approached the window, his usual refuge position, but this time Rose followed him. "Maybe," he began, his voice barely above a whisper, "maybe I'm tired of being the untouchable." Rose felt her heart speed up. Carefully, as if approaching a frightened animal, she touched his arm. Alex didn't move away. "Yesterday," he continued. When you defended me at the council, it was the first time in 20 years that anyone stood up to Richard for me, not even my mother. His voice trailed off, and Rose gently squeezed his arm. She would be proud of the man you've become, Alex. How can you be so sure? Because I have. Alex turned to face her, his eyes shining with a raw emotion that made Rose catch her breath. For a moment, it looked like he was going to lean toward her. But then his phone rang. It was Joey. Hey, champ, Alex answered, putting it on speaker. How's the program? It worked. Joey's excited voice filled the lab. I managed to make a basic version of the chat for the kids at the hospital. Rose, you have to see this. Rose smiled, watching as Alex's face softened as he spoke to his brother. It was as if Joey had found a chink in the armor Alex had built over the years, allowing a little light to enter. We're going to Seattle next week, Alex informed. Do you want us to bring you something specific? A Seahawks jacket, Joey asked hopefully. And could you two take a photo at the Space Needle for my technology blog? Alex froze his eyes, meeting Rose's. A photo together would be more fuel for media speculation, more ammunition for Richard. Sure, Joey, Rose answered. For him. Let's take your picture. After they hung up, a charged silence filled the laboratory. Rose, Alex began, about Seattle. I know, she interrupted softly. It's just work, part of the deal. But when their eyes met again, they both knew they were far beyond the terms of the original contract. Something new was growing between them, something no clause could predict or control. The car will be waiting at 7 a.m. on Tuesday, Alex said finally. Sophie will send hotel and conference details. Rose nodded, walking towards the door. Before leaving, however, he turned around one last time. Alex, thank you for caring. About Joey, it means more than you know. Alone in the lab, Alex reactivated the heart monitor hologram, but his thoughts were far from the project. They were in Seattle, in photos not taken, in moments not yet lived, and in a woman who, without realizing it, was slowly melting the ice around her heart. Seattle welcomed Alex and Rose with its characteristic light drizzle and cloudy skies. The Four Seasons Hotel, with its privileged view of the Elliott Bay Pier, would be their home for the next 3 days. Rose watched the low clouds hug the top of the Space Needle as Sophie led them through check-in. Your rooms are adjacent on the 19th floor, Sophie informed him, handing over the key cards. The conference starts tomorrow at 9 a.m. at the convention center. Your presentation is scheduled for 2 p.m. Alex nodded absently, his eyes fixed on the tablet where he was reviewing his presentation for the 1,000th time. Rose noticed how tense his shoulders were. Public presentations were clearly not his strong suit. We can review the slides after dinner, she suggested. I have some ideas about how to approach the medical aspect of the heart monitor. Alex looked up, meeting hers with a mixture of gratitude and hesitation since their conversation in the EI laboratory. A new tension had been established between them, not uncomfortable, but full of unexplored possibilities. Dinner was served in Alex's suite overlooking the city lights that were beginning to dot the twilight. Rose watched as he passionately explained the device's technical specifications, her eyes shining with genuine enthusiasm. The main sensor is 70% smaller than current models, he demonstrated, using the portable hologram. And the interface was completely redesigned with kids in mind. Joey helped with some design suggestions. You really got him involved in the project. Rose smiled, touched by the thoughtfulness. He has a unique perspective. Alex shrugged, but Rose noticed the slight blush on his cheeks. And he's surprisingly insightful for a 12-year-old. What were you like at that age? The question hung in the air for a moment. Alex turned off the hologram, dipping the room in a softer light. Before the accident, he began hesitantly. I was normal, I guess. I liked computers, sure, but I also played baseball, had friends. After... He paused, his hands balling into fists. Richard decided that feelings were a weakness. He sent me to a boarding school in Switzerland where the only contact allowed was through monitored video conferences. Rose felt her heart sink. Slowly, she approached, sitting next to him on the couch. How did you survive? Programming. Codes don't hurt, they don't betray, they don't die. His voice trailed off on the last word. Without thinking, Rose covered his hand with hers. To her surprise, Alex intertwined his fingers with hers, as he had done in the elevator. Joey reminds me of you, she said softly. The same passion for technology, the same sparkle in his eyes when he talks about code. But he has something you didn't have, people who love him unconditionally. Alex stared at her, his eyes revealing raw vulnerability. How do you do that? Do what? It makes me want to break every rule I've set to stay safe. The air between them became charged with electricity. Rose could feel the warmth of his hand in hers, the rapid pace of his breathing. Maybe, she whispered. Some rules need to be broken. Alex raised his free hand hesitantly and touched Rose's face with a gentleness that made her heart race. It was as if he was relearning the meaning of human touch through her. The moment was interrupted by a knock on the door, Sophie with the latest details of the conference. When they separated, something fundamental had changed between them. The next morning, the presentation was an absolute success. The combination of Alex's technical knowledge and Rose's medical perspective captivated the audience. The pediatric heart monitor received immediate investment offers from several major companies. We need to celebrate, Rose declared afterward as they walked through Pike Place Market. And we still owe Joey a photo. Alex hesitated, looking at the crowd of tourists around him. Rose, about last night. We don't need to talk about this, she interrupted gently. I know you need time. It's not that. He grabbed her arm, making her stop. For the first time in 20 years, I don't want any more time. I don't want any more distance. And that terrifies me. Rose felt her heart speed up. Why? Because our agreement has an expiration date. In a few months, when Joey is healed, you will leave. And I. He swallowed hard. I don't know if I can survive another loss. The raw honesty in his voice made Rose's eyes fill with tears. There in the middle of Seattle's busiest market, Alex Sterling finally let his last barrier fall. What if I didn't want to leave? She whispered. Their gazes met, filled with unspoken promises and unexplored possibilities. The world around them seemed to have disappeared, leaving just the two of them in the soft Seattle drizzle. Alex's phone rang. It was Richard. The bubble had burst, but something had fundamentally changed. The boundaries carefully established in their original agreement had begun to dissolve, giving way to something much deeper and scarier that neither of them had planned. Seattle's return was marked by a subtle shift in the dynamic between Alex and Rose. The looks lasted longer, the silences carried more meaning, and the physical distance that previously seemed natural now weighed like an unnecessary anchor. At Sterling Technologies, rumors about their relationship had reached new heights after photos of them at the Space Needle went viral. The image of Alex smiling genuinely as Rose pointed out something in the landscape captured the public's attention in a way no sensationalist headline had. The pre-sale numbers for the pediatric heart monitor are impressive, Sophie reported during the morning meeting. Social media is calling you the power for good of tech. Alex, who would normally ignore such frivolity, allowed himself a small smile. How's the implementation going at Joey's hospital? Preliminary testing begins next week, Rose replied, consulting her tablet. He's excited to be the first patient. The moment was interrupted by an unexpected call. Martha Sterling, Richard's younger sister, who Rose didn't know existed until then. Alex, darling. The melodious voice filled the room through the speakerphone. I'm in New York for the annual Sterling family photo exhibit at the Metropolitan. We need your presence. Rose watched as Alex visibly paled. Aunt Martha, you know I don't participate in these events. This year is different. We found some old photos of your mother. and Richard has agreed to donate part of the proceeds to pediatric medical technology research. The silence that followed was deafening. Rose could practically see the gears turning in Alex's mind, calculating risks and consequences. "When?" he asked finally. "Tomorrow night. And Alex, bring Rose Mitchell. It's time for us to meet the woman who achieved the impossible." After hanging up, Alex remained motionless, staring at the city through the windows of his office. Rose waited, patiently recognizing the signs of her internal struggle. "You don't have to go," he said finally, his voice low. "This goes beyond our agreement." Rose walked over, standing next to him. "What if I want to go? Not as part of the deal, but as someone who cares." Alex turned to face her, his eyes revealing a vulnerability that made her heart sink. "The photos. I haven't seen them since the accident. Richard kept them all, said they were best forgotten. But you haven't forgotten." "No," he whispered. "Sometimes I wake up in the middle of the night trying to remember the sound of her laugh, the perfume she wore." And without thinking, Rose took his hand, intertwining their fingers like they had done in Seattle. Alex allowed herself to accept the comfort, his thumb tracing soothing circles on her palm. "She loved photography." He continued, words flowing as if a dam had broken. "I had a studio in the attic of my house. I spent hours developing photos. On the day of the accident, I was returning from an exhibition." "Alex," Rose interrupted gently. "There's no need to continue." "But I want to." He stared at her intensely. "For the first time in 20 years, I want someone to know. I want you to know." The moment was interrupted by Sophie bringing the latest reports of the day. When they were alone again, Alex reluctantly let go of her hand. "The car will be here at 7 p.m. tomorrow," he said, returning to his professional tone, but his eyes remained soft. "Wear the dress Sophie is delivering tonight." Rose nodded, walking towards the door. Before leaving, however, he turned around. "Alex, thank you for trusting me." That night in her apartment, Rose found not only an elegant black dress, but also a small box with a sapphire necklace. The card simply said, it was hers. It matches her eyes. The gesture, more intimate than any contract could foresee, brought tears to her eyes. Alex Sterling, the man who had built walls around his heart for 2 decades, was slowly letting her in. In his own apartment, Alex stared at an old photo he kept hidden on his desk, him at 12 years old, smiling next to his mother in front of the photography studio. Tomorrow I would face more memories like this, but for the first time I wouldn't be alone. The trade agreement that brought them together was turning into something deeper, more truthful. And as night fell over Manhattan, they both wondered if they were ready for the consequences of this transformation. The Metropolitan Museum glowed under the lights of the New York night, its imposing columns bearing witness to the arrival of the social elite for the Sterling family photography exhibition. Rose felt the weight of the sapphire necklace around her neck, not just for its material value, but for the emotional meaning it carried. Alex remained silent in the car, his fingers drumming nervously on his knee. When Rose covered his hand with hers, he stopped, allowing their fingers to intertwine, as had become customary over the past few days. "Alex," Martha Sterling greeted them. At the entrance, an elegant woman who bore unmistakable family traits. "And you must be Rose. The photos don't do your beauty justice, darling." Rose noticed how Martha's eyes fixed on the necklace, a flash of recognition and approval passing across her face. "Catherine loved those sapphires," she commented softly. "They matched her eyes perfectly, too." Alex tensed at Rose's side, but didn't let go of her hand. Martha guided them through the galleries where black and white photographs told the story of the Sterling dynasty. Rose watched as Alex's posture subtly changed as they advanced, stiffer, more defensive. "The main section is just ahead," Martha announced, stopping in front of a closed door. "Alex, darling, maybe you'd like a private moment first." The room was empty except for a series of photographs arranged chronologically. Catherine Sterling smiled through the images her ethereal beauty captured in everyday moments, sitting in her studio walking along the beach, hugging a young Alex. "She had a gift," Alex whispered, her voice breaking. "I could see beauty where others only saw the ordinary." Rose noticed one particular photo that seemed to capture her attention. Catherine, teaching an Alex of about 10 years old how to use an old camera. The genuine joy in both their eyes was palpable even across time. "It was my first Christmas present after I became interested in technology," he explained lightly, touching the frame. "She said that even in a digital world, some things needed to be analog to preserve your soul." "She was right," Rose commented softly. "Some connections cannot be reduced to binary codes." Alex turned to face her, his eyes shining with unshed tears. The sapphire necklace sparkled under the gallery lights, creating a visual echo with the photographs where Catherine wore it. "When Richard kept everything," he continued, "it was as if she had died twice. First in the accident, then when her memories were locked in boxes and cellars." Rose took a step towards him, closing the distance between them. "But she's here now, Alex. In every smile captured, in every moment preserved. And on you," he added softly, his fingers brushing the necklace. "The way you see through my defenses, the way you can find light even in the darkest moments. It's exactly how she did it." The moment was interrupted by the arrival of Richard Sterling. His cold gaze roamed the room, lingering on the proximity between Alex and Rose. "I see you found the photos," he commented dryly. "Catherine always had a particular talent for dramatizing ordinary moments." "These were no ordinary moments for her," Alex replied, her voice carrying a strength that Rose had never heard before. "Each photograph was a declaration of love for life, for art for us." Richard arched an eyebrow, his eyes settling on the necklace Rose wore. "Interesting choice of accessories, Miss Mitchell. I imagine Alex didn't mention that Catherine was wearing that same necklace the day of the accident." Rose felt Alex stiffen beside her, but before he could respond, Martha intervened. "Richard, guests are arriving. Your presence is requested at the entrance." When they were alone again, Rose started to reach for the clasp of her necklace, but Alex stopped her. "No," he said, softly. "He has no right to turn this into something dark. My mother would have loved to see these sapphires on someone who understands their true value." "And what is that value?" Rose asked, her heart racing at the intensity of his gaze. "Love," Alex replied simply. "Not the kind of love that can be bought or sold, but the kind that transcends contracts and agreements. The kind of love my mother tried to teach me before she left." The words hovered between them, loaded with meaning. The trade agreement that had brought them together now seemed like a mere formality, given the depth of what was growing between them. The night progressed, and the gallery was filled with guests admiring the photographs. But for Alex and Rose, the real spectacle was in the small moments shared, the looks exchanged, the fingers that discreetly met the unspoken words that floated in the air between them. When they left the museum, the city looked different, as if Catherine's memories had added a new layer of meaning to every street and building. In the car, Alex held Rose's hand with a naturalness that would have been unthinkable just a few weeks ago. "Thank you," he said softly, "for helping me rediscover these memories, for showing that not all connections have to end in loss." Rose squeezed his hand in response, feeling the weight of the sapphires around her neck, no longer a burden of painful memories, but a symbol of something new blooming from the ashes of the past. News of the launch of Sterling Technologies' Pediatrics A&E heart monitor dominated headlines the following week. The project, born out of Joey's need, had become a revolution in children's medicine. But while the world was celebrating technological innovation, a storm was brewing behind the scenes. Richard Sterling called an emergency board meeting. The official reason was to discuss the new device's distribution strategy, but Rose, sitting next to Alex in the imposing meeting room, immediately realized there was something more. "Before we begin," Richard announced, his voice cutting through the air like ice, "I would like to present some interesting documents that have arrived on my desk." He slid a folder across the table. "It appears our dear Miss Mitchell has not been completely honest about her initial motivations." Alex opened the folder, his face visibly paling. Inside were copies of the original agreement between him and Rose, along with bank records detailing the transfer of the $1 million. "How did you get that?" Alex asked, his voice shaking with suppressed anger. "I have my resources." Richard smiled coldly. "The question is, how will our shareholders react to finding out that tech's good power is based on a business deal that the lovely Dr. Mitchell has essentially sold her company?" Rose felt the world spin. All the council's eyes were fixed on her, some with shock, others with disappointment. But the only one that mattered was Alex's, who remained fixed on the documents, his hands shaking slightly. "If I may," Martha Sterling interjected, her voice surprisingly firm. "What I see here is a young doctor willing to do anything to save her brother. And in the process, she not only got Joey treatment, but she also inspired an innovation that will save thousands of other children." "That doesn't change the fact that there was fraud," Richard insisted. "The public believes in a fairy tale when the reality is much more mercenary." "Enough." Alex knocked on the table, standing up. "You want to discuss motivations, Dad? Then let's talk about yours. About how you weaponized Mom's death to control me. About how you buried not just the photos, but any chance of healing." The silence that followed was deafening. Rose watched as the carefully constructed masks of father and son began to crack. "You don't understand, Alex," Richard said, his voice softer. "I was trying to protect you. The business world has no place for feelings. No, you were trying to protect yourself. From guilt, from responsibility, from love." Alex turned to Rose, his eyes softening. "But Rose showed me that there is strength in allowing yourself to feel. That vulnerability is not weakness." Rose stood up, her heart pounding. "When I came to Alex with that proposal, I was desperate. But something changed along the way. Every barrier he broke down, every genuine smile, every moment with Joey. It was all real. The agreement," she continued, taking an envelope from her briefcase, "ends today. Here is my formal resignation." Alex froze. "Rose, don't. I need to do this, Alex. For us. To prove that what we've built goes beyond any contract." Richard watched the scene with an indescribable expression. For a moment, a flash of something, recognition, perhaps regret, flashed across his eyes. "Catherine would have liked you," he said finally, surprising everyone. "She also believed that love was stronger than business." Martha took her brother's hand, a gesture of comfort that seemed decades overdue. "Maybe it's time we all learned that lesson." The board voted unanimously to continue the launch of the heart monitor as planned. The story behind its development, the true story, would be revealed at a press conference the following week. Later in Alex's office, Rose watched the city through the picture windows. The sapphire necklace still rested around her neck, a constant reminder of how the most precious things in life cannot be bought. "Why?" Alex asked, stopping next to you. "Why what?" "Why tear up the contract? Why risk everything we've built?" Rose turned to face him. "Because some things are worth more than money or security. Because I want to be by your side, not out of obligation, but out of choice." Alex touched the necklace gently, his fingers brushing her skin. "You know this changes everything, don't you? Maybe it's time for some changes." Rose's phone rang. It was Joey, excited to tell her about the first tests with the new heart monitor. Alex smiled when she heard the boy's enthusiastic voice, and Rose realized that some stories don't need contracts to be true. The sun was setting over Manhattan, painting the sky in shades of pink and gold. In the Sterling Technologies office, Two people who had started out as business partners discovered that sometimes the best agreements are those written not on paper, but in the heart. News of Rose's resignation from the deal spread through Sterling Technologies like a digital virus. The hallways buzzed with speculation theories and rumors about the real reason behind the decision that shook the company's carefully constructed structures. Alex found himself in unfamiliar territory. For the first time in his adult life, there was no contract to guide him, no clauses to set limits. Rose was there by choice, and that terrified and thrilled him in equal measure. "The preliminary results from the heart monitor are impressive," Sophie announced during the morning meeting, trying to stay focused on business. "Boston Children's Hospital wants to expand testing to 50 more patients." "Good," Alex replied absently, his eyes fixed on the empty spot where Rose usually sat. Since the board meeting 2 days ago, they had barely spoken to each other. The afternoon brought an unexpected surprise. Martha Sterling appeared in the office carrying an antique wooden box. "I found this in the mansion's attic," she explained, placing the box on Alex's desk. "Catherine had plans to give it to you when she turned 21. Inside the box, carefully preserved, were letters. Dozens of them, all addressed to Alex, dated the year his mother died. "She wrote to you every night," Martha continued softly, "about his fears, his hopes, his dreams for his future. Richard found them after the accident, but he didn't have the courage to destroy them." Alex picked up one of the cards with shaking hands. Her mother's elegant handwriting danced across the yellowed paper. "My dear Alex, today you showed me your first computer program." His eyes shone with so much pride and passion that my heart almost exploded. "But do you know what moved me most? The way you explained each line of code, wanting to share your joy with me. Never miss it, my love. This ability to open up, to share, to allow others to see your light." The words blurred as tears formed in her eyes. Martha touched his shoulder gently. "She always knew you would be special, Alex. Not just for your brilliance with technology, but for your ability to love deeply." "I missed it," he whispered. "After her, I closed myself off. Until Rose showed up," Martha added with a soft smile. Catherine would have loved to see how she managed to bring her light back. As if summoned by the conversation, Rose appeared at the office door, stopping when she saw the intimate scene. "Sorry, I'll come back later." "No." Alex stood up abruptly. "Please stay." Martha discreetly withdrew, leaving them alone with the box of memories between them. "They're letters from my mother," Alex explained, his voice hoarse with emotion. She wrote about me, about her dreams for my future." Rose approached slowly, her eyes soft with understanding. "Want to share any of them with me?" Alex picked up another letter, this one dated just a week before the accident. "Dear Alex, today I watched you help that little girl in the park fix her tablet. Not only did you resolve the technical issue, but you made sure to explain to her how to prevent it from happening again. Your father says you need to be more focused, cooler in business, but I disagree. Its greatest strength will always be its ability to connect technology with humanity. Never let anyone convince you otherwise." "She was right," Rose commented softly, sitting down next to him. "That's exactly what you did with the heart rate monitor. Not only did you create a revolutionary technology, but you thought about how to make it accessible and comfortable for kids." Alex looked up from his cards, meeting hers. "Why did you tear up the contract, Rose?" "Because your mother was right. Real connections can't be defined in clauses and paragraphs. How I feel about you, what we've built together, goes beyond any business agreement." "And what do you feel?" he asked, his voice barely above a whisper. Rose touched the sapphire necklace, a gesture that had become almost unconscious. "I think you know." The phone rang. It was Joey, excited to share the latest results from his heart monitor tests. Alex put it on speakerphone, and the boy's excited voice filled the office. "Rose, Alex, the doctors say the numbers are great, and other kids in the pediatric ward are asking when they can test too." Alex smiled, a genuine smile that lit up his entire face. "Soon, champ. We're expanding testing next week." When they hung up, the silence that ensued was different from the previous ones, no longer filled with unresolved tension, but with possibilities and promises. "I have an idea," Alex said suddenly. "How about we visit Joey this weekend in person, not through screens and numbers?" Rose felt her heart speed up. "Are you sure you never?" "It's time to follow my mother's advice," he interrupted softly. "To allow real connections to share not just codes but also moments." The afternoon sun filtered through the office windows, bathing the old letters in a golden light. Somehow it seemed fitting that Catherine Sterling's words, written with so much love 2 decades ago, were finally finding their way into her son's heart. The walls Alex had built up after his mother's death were finally crumbling, not with a dramatic bang, but with the gentle lingering of a love that transcended contracts and conventions. Boston Children's Hospital has never felt so welcoming as it did on that Saturday morning. Alex Sterling, the man who for 2 decades avoided any kind of emotional connection, walked the white hallways with a different purpose in his step. Rose at his side, their hands occasionally touching, as if they needed constant confirmation of each other's presence. "Joey is very excited," Rose commented, checking the latest messages on her phone. "He organized a little presentation about the heart monitor for the other children on the ward." Alex smiled, adjusting the package he carried, a custom software development kit he had put together especially for Joey. His mother's letters, discovered days before, still echoed in his mind, reminding him of the importance of sharing not only knowledge, but also affection. The pediatric ward was decorated with colorful drawings and balloons. A small crowd of children, parents and doctors gathered around Joey, who excitedly explained how the new device worked. "And here," he pointed to a screen, "you can see your heartbeat in real time. Alex has developed a special interface that turns the data into a game. The calmer you are, the more points you earn." Alex's eyes filled with tears when he saw the boy. Somehow Joey had managed to do exactly what Catherine always wanted, for her son used technology to connect people, not create barriers. "Mr. Sterling," Dr. Matthews, the chief cardiologist, approached. "The results are extraordinary. The level of patient compliance has increased by 80% since we implemented the gamification system." "It was Joey's idea," Alex replied, his pride evident. "He understood something that took me years to realize. Technology should serve people, not the other way around." Rose watched the interaction with her heart overflowing. This was a different Alex than the untouchable CEO she had met months ago. This was the man his mother always knew he could be. "Alex," Joey exclaimed, upon seeing them rushing in for a hug that took everyone by surprise, especially Alex, who stood frozen for a moment before awkwardly returning the gesture. "I brought you something, champ," he said, handing over the package. "I thought we could work together on the next project." Joey's eyes lit up when he saw the contents. "It's a complete development kit, Rose, check it out." "I also saw that you're teaching basic programming to other kids," Alex commented, observing a group of young patients anxiously awaiting their turn to use the tablets. "Yes, it's like you said, sharing knowledge is just as important as creating it." The boy's words, so similar to those in Catherine's letters, hit Alex like lightning. Here he was, 2 decades later, finally understanding what his mother had tried to teach him. The day passed in a blur of technology demonstrations, children's laughter, and moments of genuine connection. Alex discovered that touching and being touched, whether through spontaneous hugs from children or the gentle touch of Rose's hand in his, was no longer something to be feared. At the end of the afternoon, as they watched the sunset through the hospital windows, Rose noticed something different in Alex's face. "Not what are you thinking?" "How right my mother was," he replied, turning to face her. In her letters, she talked about not letting fear get in the way of true connections. For 20 years, I did exactly the opposite, built an empire based on distance and control. And now. He took her hands, a gesture that had become as natural as breathing. "I now understand that some risks are worth it. That some people are worth every moment of vulnerability." Rose felt her heart speed up. "Alex, let me finish." he asked softly. "When you showed up in my office with that proposal, I thought you were just making another business deal. But you broke every rule I had set, not just about physical touch or emotional closeness, but about how to live life." He took something out of his pocket, one of Catherine's letters. "My mother wrote this a week before the accident. When you find someone who makes your heart remember what it's like to beat for something other than numbers and codes, don't let fear stop you from loving." Tears were streaming freely down Rose's face now. Alex released one of her hands to gently wipe a tear from her cheek. "I'm not afraid anymore, Rose. For the first time in 20 years, I want more than contracts and agreements. I want you not for a year, not for a price, but by choice, by love." The moment was interrupted by applause. Joey and the other children had gathered at the door, watching the scene with huge smiles. "Finally!" Joey exclaimed, making everyone laugh. Alex and Rose looked at each other, their laughter mixing with the children's. The sapphire necklace glowed around Rose's neck, no longer a symbol of loss, but a promise of new beginnings. That night, as they were leaving the hospital, Alex pulled into the parking lot. "There's one last letter I want you to read," he said, handing over an envelope. Rose opened it, surprised to see that the date was current. It was not a letter from Catherine, but from Alex himself. "Dear Mom, today, I finally understood what you tried to teach me. Love is not a weakness to be avoided, but a strength that makes us better. Rose showed me this, as did Joey. You would be proud to see how their legacy of connection and compassion lives on through them. And through me, finally. With eternal love, your son Alex." The agreement that started it all had transformed into something much more precious, a story of healing, redemption, and love that transcended contracts and conventions. And as the sun set over Boston, the once untouchable Alex Sterling discovered that a few touches are worth a lifetime of waiting.